Hey, Brittany.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for joining us. Good to see you.
You as well.
It is recording and
Okay.
transcribing already because when I start the meeting, that automatically happens. But we'll be waiting for everyone to join us. So I'll
Sounds
just
good.
mute myself here and be letting people in as they're joining us here in the next few minutes.
Perfect. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment just so I can see everyone who's joining in.
Christy, I know Paul was going to jump on. I think you guys have his email wrong, so I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. He's a tough last name.
Yes. Oh, there he is. See him. There he is. Hey. Committee members, as you're hopping in today, I see many of us are here. Would you please take a moment to put your name in the chat for attendance purposes? We'll just gather it that way so we can see who is all in the room with us.
Chrissy, just to clarify, do you want just committee members to do that or everybody?
Just committee members for now. Let's get our committee members in, and then we'll have a moment for a couple of times for public comment, and we can have anyone in the public comment also then add into the chat. Thanks, Aislinn.
Christy, are you talking to us?
I was.
Sorry,
Thank
you're
you.
muted. Thank you.
Can you hear? Hopefully that works better now. I was just saying I did get a couple of emails from a couple committee members who are going to be a little delayed joining in, but they will be joining us soon. So it looks like we've got enough committee members to get started with our process of our first session to get going on our negotiated rulemaking committee session 1. We will, as I noted, some of you were jumping in, it is recording. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now so that I can. Oh, here's Christy. Great. And Christy, it looks like you can see and hear us as well. Just want to make sure some of the ones joining in were, I have to allow it. All right. Okay. Can everyone see my screen now? Okay. Wonderful. Well, welcome to session 1 here on May 19th at 3:30 for our negotiated rulemaking committee for the Special Education Chapter 55 updates. A couple of reminders for our work today. This meeting is being recorded. If you haven't already, please, committee members, put your name in the chat for the attendance purposes. Please do keep cameras on so we can see you, and use the raise hand feature, but please also just feel free to unmute. If I don't see that, I know I can see just a few people at a time. Hopefully raising your hand will pop you up so I can see, or the facilitator can see that you need to say something, but feel free to unmute as well to get our attention if you'd like to speak. Here are our committee members. I think most of us are here. Welcome. And we are going to move on to our first action as a negotiated rulemaking committee. And as we talked about in the orientation, and those of you who are able to review that orientation information, your first opportunity to work together as a committee is to approve the facilitator. And we have Aislinn Brown as our proposed facilitator. She gave a little introduction last week at the orientation, shared a little about herself. But right now, I would like to turn it over to the committee. If there's any dissent or to having Aislinn be the facilitator, and if not, then if everyone agrees, then please let me know if anyone has a disagreement to that. You can unmute or raise your hand if you'd like to speak. Okay. I don't see any hand raised, so by working on consensus, it seems that by consensus, this committee has now agreed to moving forward with approving Aislinn Brown as the facilitator for this negotiated rulemaking committee.
Thank you, Christy. And thanks, everyone. I am excited to lead you through this. I think this one should be a pretty short one, but we'll see. I guess it just depends on all the discussion we have. So the next steps is that this committee needs to confirm itself. So, Christy, if we could go back to the slide with the committee members. So if that looks right to everybody, does anybody have any issues with their role or their location or anything else that is listed on there? Any issues with confirming this committee? I am not seeing any hands raised. So the committee has been confirmed. So next, Christy, if you want to walk us through, I know you had an example on practicing consensus as we have it defined.
Absolutely. Let me just reshare my screen here so you can get a practice on what this will look like for you. Reshare.
So we're going to practice consensus on a sample definition, but Christy, I'll let you take it from here. Just wanted to That might have been a little confusing the way I
Yeah.
phrased it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Iceland. So if you can, you should be able to see on my screen here, I've put this in the format of what will actually be the sort of the table that we'll be working through for your later work and working on the negotiated rulemaking. But I've put a consensus definition. Here we go. Hang on, someone's just admitting them now. And you can see the definition there is the unanimous concurrence among the members' interests represented on a negotiated rulemaking committee. Does anybody have a proposed any change? Do you agree with that as a definition of consensus for our team to work through, or do you have anything that you would like to propose to change? You can unmute or raise your hand and let us know. And what we'll be doing is we're working through this. I will be copying and I will paste this over into the proposed changes side of our working document. And this will be where I would make some changes. So for an example, as the committee says, I think we need to remove this one word, then I would have the opportunity here is perhaps to strike through a word, and then the committee can look at that as a proposed change and decide, oh, do we agree with that? Can we live with that? So this is sort of the work that you would be doing, that we'll be doing moving forward. And so in this example of a proposed change, the unanimous concurrence among the members represented on a negotiated rulemaking committee is the example. And there's a proposed change there. And if anyone had another change, they would then propose a different change. We would update it here on the screen for everyone to see and then to move on with consensus. Is there anyone that has a different change or something they'd like to update on this definition? Or does this look like a definition that the committee could, as a sample, agree with?
See, I'm not sure if Paul connected by phone, so I'm not sure if he can see it. Paul, do you need us to read this out for you? Are you able to view?
I will just make sure. I will stop sharing here and let me see if I can give Paul.
See him on there, but he's muted.
He should.
Well,
It says he has the opportunity to talk. Paul, can you?
Patrick, since you were in touch with him, do you want to maybe get a hold of him and see if you can help him work out that bug while we keep going through the background? Thank you.
Thanks,
Yep, I'm
Patrick.
sending in some text messages right now.
Okay. Thanks, Patrick. And so the definition that we proposed definition sample, again, this is not part of the work. This is just the sample for you to see. I will read it out loud for you all. The unanimous concurrence among the members represented on a negotiated rulemaking committee. Anyone have any other changes or opinions for our sample work? See some head shaking and no hands raised. Hey.
Christy, are you still sharing?
I stopped sharing so that I could see if I could get Paul into the meeting.
He can hear anything that we put on. He was able to see the presentation a minute ago, and he can hear everything. He, for some reason, it keeps saying his is muted on his end when he tries to talk.
All right.
Can he put in the chat just if he has any dissent? Is he able to use that if we can't hear him?
Does not look like he can use the chat.
Okay. Unless
can
we could figure
relay-
that bug out. Yeah, if he
Yeah.
can just message you, I guess then if that's the best we can do, then we at least can make sure
I'll-
he doesn't have any disagreement. That'd be great.
Yeah, I'll put, because I don't think I vote on anything anyway, right, being part of OPI. And so.
No, Patrick, you are a voting member. You are on the.
Okay.
Yep,
Yeah.
you are on the committee.
So when it
Okay.
comes to that, I'll put in the chat both one for myself and then I'll put a proxy in there for Paul based on what he sends me here.
Okay. Well, and it's just if he dissents, usually we won't go through everybody just to make sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if he has any concerns or if you have any concerns, you could just voice yours. But since he's on mute, if you could put it in the chat, we can try to figure out how to reach him when the time
Yep.
comes.
He gave the thumbs up. We're good.
Okay, thank you,
Okay.
Paul. All right. I will then go back to screen share. And we did not have on our sample, it does not sound like we had any dissent for this. And so then this would be moved to the finalized proposal, and we would put in here committee consensus reached. And that way we would know that that is the final consensus for this particular item. So this will be the table that we'll be working through all together on the screens here.
Thanks, Christy.
Yeah, and let me switch back to the other screen here.
Christy, which slide were you on? Sorry, Paul was asking a question. Were you on the sample
yes.
spreadsheet?
Yep, and we are actually going to be moving on to slide number 5.
Okay.
And it looks like you all received a working document so you could follow along with this. So this is slide 5. And Aislinn, I will pop it back over to you to give the next steps here on this background information.
Sure. So I don't know, is this Ellery, was this for you?
This is
You wanted to
Ellery,
pick
yeah.
up? Yeah. I can wing it.
No worries. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ellery Hill. I'm here to just provide you a brief overview of the statutory and accreditation framework connected to the Montana's educational standards and how those standards relate to instructional paraprofessionals. We'll begin here with the Montana Code Annotated 20-1-101, and then we'll transition briefly over to the Administrative Rules of Montana, Chapter 55. This rule, MCA 20-1-101, establishes the foundation for Montana's accreditation standards and outlines the general educational goals of Montana. As shown on this slide, those accreditation standards include such areas as school leadership, educational opportunity, academic requirements, program area standards, content and performance standards, student assessment, and general provisions. Together, these standards create the framework schools use to support student learning and maintain accreditation expectations across the state. As part of the ongoing work related to educator workforce needs, the addition of the Class 9 Special Education Technician license under ARM 57-439 requires update within the Chapter 55 related to licensure duties and instructional paraprofessional responsibilities. So the next slide goes into the Administrative Rules of Montana. This chapter establishes Montana's accreditation standards for schools, including expectations related to leadership, staffing, licensure, and instructional support. Subchapter 55(7) focuses on school leadership and includes sections related to administrators, teaching assignments, professional development, and instructional paraprofessionals. This section is most relevant as discussed to 1055-715 regarding instructional paraprofessionals and supervision requirements. You can see this in this example, how this rule establishes the duties of paraprofessionals. The work under the supervision of licensed teachers and helps define the structure for instructional support within schools. The updates you will now be discussing with the special education technician in ARM 1055-725 rule to ensure alignment between licensure, supervision requirements, and accreditation standards. That is a very brief background for you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Ellery.
Ellery.
So we have two different proposed rules that are coming to you as a proposal, but this committee is the one that does the initial work and decides whether or not to send them on to BPE. And the first one is the special education graduation requirements. So the reason that OPI identified this rule to the Board of Public Ed at a previous meeting when they decided to open up Chapter 55 to do some revisions is that a court order requires a FAPE to be available until up to age 22, and graduation off an IEP doesn't count as meeting that requirement. So a student can receive a regular high school diploma and they can exit early. The FAPE requirement doesn't follow after that. But the way this was written was a student eligible to receive a special education services as identified under IDEA and who has successfully completed the goals identified on an individualized education program for high school completion shall be awarded a diploma. The court in its order said that that is not compliant with the IDEA. So that's just kind of a cleanup that OPI proposed to BPE, and BPA decided to open rulemaking to try to figure that piece out and just get that cleaned up according to the federal court order we got. Any questions about that piece? We'll get into these more later. This is just kind of an overview. Christy.
Hi, thank you. I am curious about, you had said that under an IEP that does not count. Is that just if they don't reach the credit goals or?
So a student can't be, the obligation to provide FAPE extends, like can't be stopped just because the students met their IEP goals. If they receive a regular diploma, then they can graduate, but they can't just graduate and no longer have a FAPE obligation. If the student no longer wants to receive a FAPE after they've met their IEP goals, that's one thing, but the school district is still required to offer it. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any.
Hi there. Yeah, I have a few
Oh, sorry.
questions. But I understand that we're just kind of going through the slides, so I'll save them for whenever at the end.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Sure.
Just so
Yeah.
we can get
Anytime you
through
want
it.
to ask, feel
Yeah.
free. We will get into this when we actually go through the editing. So,
Sounds good.
but
Thank
yep,
you.
happy to answer anything. Okay. Anything else on this first rule we'll be looking at? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. Chrissy, next slide, please. And then, Chrissy, did you want to go over this or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, this is just sort of touching back on the orientation. Next, we'll be looking at adding in the two definitions and supervision and job duty protocols for the special education technician. So this is just that reminder on the next pieces that we'll be working on. So this slide looks similar to one that you saw in the orientation. And then as we go forward, this special education technician is what the board recently passed and put into the administrative rules. This is actually the license. So this is just to give you a little bit more background on what that special education technician needs to have to be as they're getting their license. They have to, hold the high school diploma, completion of approved special education technician modules, proof of, documented special education work. So this is just some of that background for you to understand what is required of the special education technician to get their license as recently approved by the Board of Public Education. And then we will be moving into our first round of proposed comments here very shortly. And so Aislinn, I'll send it back to you.
Yeah, sure. So I guess we'll start with public comment now that I don't know if there's anyone from the public on that's not on this committee, but if anyone has a comment about, but before we get started, it sounds like Kathleen can't hear us. So I'm not sure. If we can have someone reach out to
sharing
her.
for a second here. And yeah. It looks like she should be. I'll reach out to her in an email really quickly here.
Okay.
I'm glad to see her on here,
She's on the
I'll-
chat too. Okay.
Okay. Oh, perfect. She got it. Sounds great.
Okay. Can we go back to that slide then when you have a second?
Absolutely. Let me get that pulled right up.
I don't think there are any members of the public on, are there?
There are no, and actually there are no members of the public on. And additionally, I did not receive any public comment in email either as of 8:30 this morning.
And just for the record, this was posted, right, on OPI's website and
in our the superintendent's email weekly newsletter as well.
Okay. Well, if we don't have any public comment, I think we can move on. Okay, so, oh, go ahead, Christy. You can read.
Yep.
Oh, you're breaking up for me. I don't know if that's, I think. Let's see. Well, I can go over this
That
part.
better?
Oh, yeah,
that
that's
better?
better. Okay, go ahead.
This is the folder that I sent you via email. These are the working documents I will be sharing on screen, but you do also have access to them in the folders to follow along. So I just wanted to point that out to the committee. And then Aislinn, I will jump into the first, to our first order working document if you're ready for that.
Yep, sounds good. Looks like Julie just added a link to the documents in the chat as well. So if for some reason you did not get that email, you should be able to access them there as well. So this first one, 1055-805. So the proposal is to revise number 4 by eliminating it so that it no longer says a student eligible to receive special education services as identified under IDEA and who has successfully completed the goals identified on an individualized education program for high school completion shall be awarded a diploma. Do we have any discussion, questions, or anything about that before we get into consensus building? Go ahead, Nicole.
Thanks. I just have maybe a question because I just don't know about SPED as well. But is there any alternative routes to graduation, or like after removing this, understanding that they no longer can graduate from their IEP goals? Or is there something that we need to add, or is it now just based solely on graduation requirements in 905?
So I guess that I'll take that as two pieces, and I'll probably defer to Julie or Christy on answering the specific pieces. But there are still, the issue is just that this eliminated a FAPE. So I don't know, Christy, Julie, do you guys have an answer to the question about alternative diplomas? I know that is something we're looking at. Oh, thanks, Patrick. I don't know why I even tried. You guys are the
okay.
specialists.
Yeah, right now, McCall, there is not another option. Districts can create their own local options, like a certificate of completion, things like that, that recognize, right, a student has completed 4 years, done the work, similar work to what their peers have done, had that accomplishment, doesn't negate, as Aislinn has said, doesn't negate the offer for the continuation of FAPE, even if they achieve some sort of alternate certificate within the district. And at the state level, there is nothing. There was mentioned, I believe it was at the last BP meeting. I want to say Marie had it in her report, talking about alternate standards and needing to look at that in order to be able to create an alternate diploma, needing those alternate standards. But even that diploma would not, it would still require the offer of FAPE to be continued after that because it hasn't achieved the standards for graduation.
So Patrick, if I'm hearing you right, basically the only way they would be able to receive a state diploma is if they met the graduation requirements in 905, but districts can create a separate certificate. Okay, I see Julie nodding her head. Okay. Is it worth adding anything that says something like that to clarify? Just take it out. Okay.
We have that in our guidance. That's a lot of the work we've been doing in the guidance for school districts. That's been all of the, frankly, the content of all of our presentations and everything this year has been clarifying that for them, continuing to work on those pieces. So I don't know if that falls more under that guidance piece with us versus putting something in there.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion about this one? Okay, does anybody have a dissent from this, the elimination of number 4 here? Lively group. I'm not seeing any. Go ahead, Patrick.
I just wanted to follow up. I left a piece out there, McCall. Part of that guidance that we did add is around the transition IEP portion where they're marking in graduation that comes to the federal reporting level. If a district has, if they do have a certificate of completion that, the board has created and recognized and that they offer for students who have achieved alternate levels of achievement there, the IEP portion for reporting, we're adding another box to what that graduation looks like. So there is an option for if a district does have those alternate forms, then that will not, it still count. They still have to continue again. They offer FAPE. I want to make sure that's always there. But they don't get counted at the federal reporting level as a dropout then at that point. Whereas in a situation without that, they do get counted as that dropout in the federal reporting side of it.
Patrick, I think you prompted another question. Crystal, go ahead.
I would like you to clarify a little bit more on your understanding, so that I have an understanding of what you believe the difference is between what should be in Chapter 55 and what should be in your guidance, just so I have a better idea even as we move forward. That does seem kind of clear, like what McCall said. Maybe it would be clear, but I don't know if it's necessary to have it here. So just give me more background on that, please.
So Crystal, I'm going to take that. So I think what's really important is these are rules and they have accountability metrics to them, right? And so I think putting things in here that are you could consider or you might want to is more of a guidance, because ARM is you will and not, you can kind of think of it as it's not a suggestion or a maybe. It is what's the standard of what's expected. And so a lot of times when it's kind of like, well, you could consider, you might want to, that's something around guidance, versus here in ARM, we want it to be very clear and very particular around like, you can't do this. So putting something else in here could create that gray area of what's not necessarily a requirement, if you will. Does that make sense? So I believe that it belongs more in, if you want to do certificates and you want to proceed with that, that's guidance. That's not rule.
Understood. I'm gonna have just a real quick follow-up, which means that, so this committee could conceivably think that it should be required, or is that a board, a public ed question? Like, we could put it in here and we could require students or schools to have an alternative pathway so that they could actually, students eligible could have a diploma, require it?
So-
We could do that.
So
These are all hypotheticals. I'm not sure.
So I think that's, in order to do that, you have to have a set of standards, like alternative standards that say a student who is eligible to receive an alternative diploma has to demonstrate an alternative set of mathematics standards, of English standards, of science standards, of social standards, maybe at a different level that's modified, but it's not it's not at the level of standards that's expected for a regular diploma. So in order to do that, you kind of have to have those first to be able to say on a common level, in order for us to have an alternative diploma, what are the expectations to receive that alternative diploma? So there's conversations about pursuing and have been brought up to the Board of Public Ed to say, should we consider defining some standards, alternative standards for math and ELA and science and social studies that lead to an alternative diploma?
I see Christy was next to raise your hand.
I was just gonna go on, I was thinking of a way to put this is, we could say a student eligible to receive special education services as identified under IDEA and who has successfully completed graduation requirements, or that's kind of where I was gonna take it, so that it's more clear that it has to be state requirements or state graduation requirements to receive it, should be awarded a diploma, if that makes sense.
Christy, are you making that an official proposal for the group to consider that I should type in? And then I would like you to sort of speak the exact words you want me to put in, or are you just sort of asking for thoughts?
I was just kind of asking for thoughts because I don't want to do anything official and like that's anything, like if anybody has any thoughts on that, or if that's unclear or maybe not necessary.
Ricky Lynn, you'd raised your hand. I don't know if it was related to that or.
Yeah, no, it was related to that. I definitely agree with Crystal and Christy on their thoughts about the different alternatives pertaining to that. I think that each just this could tailor into so many different things, and I think that they should give the student the opportunity to and of course the teachers to even like help provide that extra alternative. Hold on, sorry, it's been a long day. I'm trying to think of how to word this. And no, I do. I like the different alternative to that though, because again, it gives them the option. So, but with that being said though, wouldn't that require the like the gen ed teachers to require have like more training and stuff to help that student to quote to accommodate them, but again we're adjusting the different math, reading, social studies, so on and so forth. Then I hope I'm making sense whenever I say that. Like
So I think Ricky Lynn, I don't know, Aislinn, if I can go, sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna defer that to LPI. I just wanted
I
to
think-
make sure we had that.
I think what's really important is to understand what this whole chapter is about and why it sits in chapter 55. So I just want to kind of zoom out a little bit for a second, because I think you're bringing up a really critical point that comes in 1, 2, and 3 that you're mentioning that's really vital. And so chapter 55 are the standards which all schools have to follow to be a quality school, right? And so there are, and chapter 8 is for educational opportunities. That's the name of that chapter. And so in this chapter is also some sections on what a school is expected to do for English language learners, or what a school is expected to do for gifted and talented. And so this particular one is about what a school is expected to do for special education. So if you look at number 1, they need to provide the educational opportunities and to services to students as aligned with federal regulation under IDA. They have to comply with all federal and state laws and regulations addressing special education, and a school district is expected to provide structured support, and this was the part you're bringing up, and assistance to regular education teachers, right, in identifying and meeting the diverse needs of students receiving special education services. So a school district is required to do that in order for it to be an accredited school. This last piece here, that was what a school was expected to do if a student did not receive, like, if they met their IEP goals, they could have received a regular high school diploma. That's no longer legal. Basically, the court order determined that not to be. So we cannot expect a school district to have to be held to that standard because it's not legal. So I think what's really important is that this section is about saying to our school districts, this is what we expect you to do for special education. So it's, I don't know if that helps or if I've made it even more complicated, but I think your point was about number 3.
Yes, I'm so sorry. It's been a really long day. I no, and I agree with like all of the pinpoints 1 through 4 pertaining to that. I think that again the alternative and just making sure that everybody is like in compliance with what's being requested in this chapter 55. I do think that if they're if the child is not eligible, sorry, I'm just trying to get like a full grasp so I can like participate and like fully, how am I trying to say this? So sorry. I've done so much paperwork today, it's crazy.
So just to, I don't know if this will help clarify, but special education students can still get a regular diploma. They just have to meet the requirements of the regular diploma. So they can't get a regular diploma if they're just meeting their IEP goals. That is essentially what the court has said. And in order for FAPE to continue, they would still have to be eligible to receive special education services as well. So I don't know if I'm just familiar with the court order, so I can talk from that perspective.
It's basically a discrimination issue, right? Because you're now creating access to diplomas that not all students can achieve.
And if it helps for more background, the order came of a lawsuit that was brought by Disability Rights Montana against the state, basically saying, we think these rules don't comply with the IDEA. And so this was their suggestion to eliminate that to make us in compliance with the IDEA, and the court agreed with that.
Also, just pointing out again, if we frame it from all of our students are general education students first. So we start with all of those general education laws first for students, which is where that graduation sits. So again, to go to that discrimination level, if we have a subgroup of that has these, that has other options for achieving the same diploma without achieving the same standards, that's where the problem comes in. And so that's where the elimination of the IEP team's ability to just, basically you're giving that IEP team then the ability to make that decision to graduate a student. If you allow this to happen, which is not the way that's supposed to work.
Any other conversation, discussion, suggested changes to this one? Okay. Does anybody have, I'm not seeing any hands raised. Does anybody have any dissent from just eliminating number 4? I am not seeing any. So consensus has been reached by the committee on this one. And Patrick, I'm just going to assume you're not hearing any dissent from Paul unless I hear you say otherwise on this. Okay. Let's move on
Correct.
to the next.
Sorry,
Good.
I didn't.
No
I was
worries.
trying to respond and I hadn't. He did ask a question: is a student who earns a diploma still eligible for IDEA services? And no, I think Aislinn, you just made that point.
Yeah.
Clear on that piece. He asked that before we got to that, so thank you.
Yeah, that was the whole issue, is students were being exited based on IEP goals and therefore no longer receiving a FAPE. Okay, so this one is a bit longer. This is the second rule we're going to look at, 1055, 705, or 725. Thanks, Christy. So special education technician. And if you want to scroll down, I'll just read this all just so everybody can follow along. So this is all new language that would be added into ARM to create a special education technician. So 1, special education technician shall be under the direction of the supervising special education teacher who is responsible for instruction and assessment of students with special needs. 2, special education technicians under the direct supervision of a licensed special education teacher may A, schedule and coordinate special education meetings, B, collect, prepare, and organize student-specific data and information, C, deliver instruction in a one-to-one and small group settings, and D, conduct mandatory statewide assessments. 3, special education technicians shall not A, conduct or interpret formalized and standardized special education evaluations unless otherwise qualified to do so. B, access the student information system, SIS, for purposes of creating or developing documents related to the special education record, with the exception of the access/contact log. C, make independent decisions regarding the implementation of a student's IEP, or D, convene and conduct special education meetings. And just so you know, we will have a couple of definitions as well that we'll have you look at, and just so you know that, so it'll be special education technician and supervising special education teacher will both be defined in a different part of the role. Every role has definitions at the beginning rather than as you go through the roles. So let's take this. I think it'd be helpful to take this just part by part, so we're not looking at all as one. So number 1, does anybody have any issues with that language? Any thoughts? McCall, you raised your hand first.
Not issue, but I'd like to propose that in number 1, it reads special education technicians, that technicians be plural. 2 and 3 both have it say technicians. So I think that we should keep that consistent.
Okay. So Christy's just going to add this in. If anybody does anybody have any discussion about that before we move on to the next hand that was raised? Okay, Crystal, you're up next. Oh, did you not need to?
I got you. I just have to go back a little bit because I'm actually just want I need, I think, a definition of technician. Why? And I know this is probably going way back and maybe further than you guys want, and somebody wants to send it to me offline, that's fine. But I'm just trying to figure out why, if it is a para, why is it not called a para?
I would have to refer to someone at OPI. Julie, do you know? I'm pulling up to see if there is a definition.
I'm happy to jump in there too a little bit. So Crystal, right? I'm sure you've been through all the cycles back and forth of the highly qualified to not highly qualified paras and all of those pieces. And so right back at the point, right, where Title I is the one where it needs the highly qualified paras, the others. So very limited qualifications on what a paraprofessional needs to be a paraprofessional, whereas the special education technician, that 1057-439 that was just put into place, sets out all these learning requirements that they have to achieve to get that license. So there's 40 online modules that they have to complete, and then there's 4 college courses that are in the beginnings of the educator prep programs that they have to complete as well to get that special education technician license. So it's again, a specified level of training that they get compared to a regular para that you can hire for any position in the building.
Okay. Christy, you had your hand raised next.
What is, so I find often, you know, not as much as a parent, but as a working with other children, I find a lot, you know, we just kind of spoke about paraprofessionals not having specialized training. But often I've seen paraprofessionals doing the majority of teaching. And while the technician will have more qualifications, how is it going? How are we going to, I guess, ensure that there's adequate supervision? I mean, maybe that's just, or is there anything that can be written in what super, I don't know. I guess I'm just kind of curious about others' thoughts on that.
Let's see. It looks like, I don't know, I saw Ricky Lynn's hand go up, but Kathleen, you were first, but I don't know if it was in reference to that discussion. So does anybody maybe just chime in, because I'm getting a little lost in the sauce with the hands raised, if you have anything in response to Christie's while we're on this thread.
Yes, Chris.
So,
Julie,
sorry,
go ahead,
Patrick.
and then I can follow, or whoever. I can't see who's talking. Sorry.
Oh, I think
So this
Kathleen
is-
was talking.
This
Okay,
is Kathy,
I'll be-
Kathy Gilboy.
Okay.
I just want to speak a little bit about being in the field for 25 years as a special education teacher, with oftentimes having a caseload of 50 plus students. And I had a para who really honestly provided a lot of this service for me, but never had the title of a technician, but did these kinds of things. She made the meeting notes. I scheduled the meetings with the principal and the building, and then she would contact the parents and get them confirmed. So I see, and I hope this clears it up a little bit. I see the technician as a person that fills that gap, because they're not necessarily a para. Like Patrick said, you can hire almost anybody off the street these days because they're in high need. But this technician fills that gap between a para and a special ed teacher, and that support for that special ed teacher, so that we as special education teachers can do the evaluations, conduct the assessments that need to be done without having to worry about that technical part, or even in a way an administrative assistant type position. So I see it as kind of a meet in the middle, filling in that gap and closing that circle of supporting the special education teacher in those types of tasks that need to be taken care of, that a para probably shouldn't really do, but probably has been doing for a long time.
Thanks, Kathy. Any other thoughts on that, Patrick?
Yeah, I was just, Kathy, I think said it perfectly, particularly right at the end there. There's a lot of these practices that are going on out there that are outside the scope of what paraprofessionals should be doing. When you go back and look at the paraprofessional arm that was discussed earlier, there's a lot of stuff that is going on outside that scope. We realize also the reality of the situation of our schools in Montana, and trying to provide those folks that are already doing these things plus others this higher level of training to, as Kathy said, help take off a lot of those daily duties of the special education teacher so they can focus on those big pieces and make sure the student cases are being managed, the evaluations are done, all of those pieces.
Christy, I just wanted to circle back on your initial question because I think it's really super important. That's the purpose of this arm, is to put into the accreditation standards to say for schools, if you have somebody who's operating and licensed as a special education technician, this is what their role is, and this is how they're supposed to be supervised. So I really appreciated your question because it kind of made it really important around, like, that's why we're having this conversation and we want this in here, because this person should be supervised. And then even your questions about paraprofessionals, that's actually, and Patrick just referenced it, it's in this particular chapter 2, where it talks about what the role of a paraprofessional should be and how they should be supervised under the direction of a teacher. And that includes any type of paraprofessional, a Title I paraprofessional, a special education paraprofessional. So I think your question is really important as to why we need to kind of have this language, if you will.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts on that thread? Feel free to chime in if I missed anybody.
Yeah, so I think the wording is really nice, adding the technicians, but I just need some clarification on the individual, of course, the special education teacher who is responsible for instruction and assessment. So is it performance-based assessment, or like the practicum evaluation type of assessment? And that's signed by a supervised licensed SPED teacher, correct? I just, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'll defer that to, looks like Julie's nodding her head, so.
Kathy can go, and then
Or Kathy, oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
Thank you. It's hard to
And
keep track of all these hands. Feel free to
Right.
interrupt me.
Exactly. I think you bring up a great point. There's a difference between assessments, testing, and evaluations. And so a special education teacher conducts those evaluations, which includes all of those standardized norm referenced tests that they are actually trained to do, and they can't get a license to teach special education if they've not gone through an accredited program that's trained them to administer those types of assessments. So there's standardized and norm referenced. We're not talking about just giving a test. They're very different. So only a licensed special education teacher can conduct those, and a SPED technician would not fall, absolutely not fall under that at all.
Yes, yeah, I appreciate that clarification. I was meaning for, like, are we doing, like, is it the performance based, or are we doing like a practicum evaluation type of assessment
Of the students?
of the technician? Like, who would be supervising, and like what kind of evaluation like would it be? So I just needed some like clarification so I can fully be able to comprehend where it says,
So
instruction
Ricky
and
Lynn,
assessment.
are you talking about like your job performance as a technician, like that kind of job performance evaluation?
Yes, that,
Okay.
and then of course it's this and it says special education technician shall be under the direction of supervising special education teacher who is responsible for instruction and assessment. What could someone elaborate on the assessment? Like there's so many different assessments in SPED.
Yeah.
I just wanted the clarification.
It
of
is
what
like
kind.
it is definitely piles of types of assessments. So I think that's a really good question. So one thing, first of all, with evaluation of job performance, there's another standard in ARM in accreditation here. That's over in the 600s that talks about like how school staff get evaluated. And so that's kind of over there. And a lot of times, like a special education teacher will be assisting for their paraprofessionals in that performance evaluation and supporting that because they're supervising them, if you will. And they kind of support that process with their school administrator a lot of times. In terms of assessment, like, so imagine an assessment where you're given a lesson and you're teaching the students how to add and multiply. Let's just say that's what the lessons are about. You might do an assessment to see how students are doing with that. Or there's a statewide assessment that has to be conducted. A technician could help with that. But what they can't do is do evaluations that determine, is the student meeting their goals? Should the student be exited for special education? Should the student minutes for their IEP change, or should they be like that kind of evaluation on determination of what's happening in regards to like the services that a students need, that a technician cannot do that. They can do quizzes. They can do types of assessments that they could be administering to all students, not just students with special ed, if that makes sense. I don't know if I made that clear or worse, but
No, that
yeah.
was perfect because again, I'm obtaining my bachelor's for SPED, and like I said, there's so many assessments, and that word is like so look abroad, and I just wanted some clarification on my end on what, like, well, what kind of assessment of student with special needs? Because again, there's such a we can go into detail about that. So thank you.
Brittany, I see you have your hand up.
Help find muted. I was gonna ask a clarifying question. So I am way on the other side of this. I'm the money person in the district, and Julie asked me to be here in regards to that. So this is a little outside of my element. My question is, before I have to hop off, is when is this getting implemented? And this is something to take back to OPI, Julie, is there going to be funding for this? Because all of our class licensures, is this funded the Teach Act, and how does that qualify for that, or does it or doesn't it? Because there's obviously not a lot of money going to special ed, which all of you can probably attest for, and I see it firsthand from my side. And so what are we doing on that side of it? And like I said, when is it getting implemented so that we can start preparing as districts across the state?
So I think, Brittany, it's a beautiful question. There's a process that has to follow, like once this crew gets done, and Aislinn will be sharing with us, we actually have to do an economic impact survey that goes out to schools to say, based upon these rules, by adding these rules, is it going to cause an impact financially, so that we can get responses, and then that's got to go to the Board of Public Ed, and then the Board of Public Ed takes that to the legislature, and that kind of moves there. And so that's part of the rulemaking process. So it takes a little bit of time for these rules to get defined. And then there's the whole process that goes along, and it takes a few months. And we're kind of coming up against the clock because the end of the year before legislation session starts, the last quarter, you can't be rulemaking. And so we'll probably won't have this in front of the legislature. McCall can probably speak to that more until like February-ish of 27, when we would be finally ready to begin implementing, because it won't go to them until like January or February for the economic impact statement. So it takes a while sometimes to, pass the rules to the soup, to the Board of Public Ed, to the rulemaking process, and then the economic impact statement. So I think it's a really good question. It's an important one.
And then Brittany, just to add on to that, so our next session is when we'll be doing the economic impact survey questions. So it sounded like you might have to leave this one a little early, but I definitely think it would be valuable for the committee to have your input as a clerk when we're going over those. Anything else on that? Okay, let's go back.
Just one last piece, Aislinn, on that. School districts are not expected to have special ed technicians. It's if they do have them and they hire them and they're licensed, then they would have to follow these rules. So if they choose not to do this, that could be a district choice as well.
Okay, so I'm going to read our proposed changes. Oh, Paul, sorry. I want to make sure I get to you first. Go ahead.
Nope, sorry.
We can hear
glad
you.
Yep, sorry, we had some things going on here. Thanks, Patrick, for working with me. So I had a question to Patrick and he answered it, but I'm still kind of confused. And it comes around special education teacher. I understand that you can't have special education without a special ed teacher. But really thinking about some of our rural schools that might be struggling to get a special ed teacher, that means to me that they would not be eligible for a special ed technician because they cannot get a special ed teacher. So my question is there a class 5 for a special ed teacher, or what is this similar to a class 5 for special ed, and would that count as a special ed teacher for this ARM proposal?
Julie, do you want to?
Sure, but hi,
that
Paul,
one.
it's good to see you. So we got a few people from Anaconda on this channel. That makes my day. So in terms of special education, in terms of the licensure, right? A special education teacher can get a class 5 provisional. But they have to complete the program in 3 years. They have to be supervised. There's some pieces, but they cannot go longer than 3 years. But no one can have a class 5 for longer than 3 years. A special education teacher cannot get an emergency authorization, like a district can't seek it for that. That is not permitted. And so that's not allowed. And so I was wondering, so like in terms of like who plays this role as a special education supervised teacher and what level of experience do they need? Because you asked the question, could someone like a special education teacher who's on a class 5, right, on a provisional license, supervise a technician? And so I think that's going to be a really important question to clarify and dig into when we get to the definition of a supervised, a special education teacher, a supervision, who can supervise. Because I think that's in the proposed definition, is to talk about those qualifications. Do they have to have a certain number of years and such? So, and that's going to be important to talk about. Do they have to be fully licensed? Do they have to have more than a year of experience? So do you take a teacher who's a first year teaching special education on a provisional license and ask them to be supervising a sped technician? That's probably a good conversation for this group to have. So I think that'll come up when we get to the definitions. I don't know if I helped that or not. Answer your question, Paul.
You put it in the notes for us to talk about later. So just a quick follow-up to that, and maybe I missed this in transition from my phone back to the computer. Is the special ed technician considered for a quality ed payment? Or has that been talked about at this point?
Not currently. That would have to be
Thank you.
proposed.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read out our proposed changes to just this first section. So it would read 1, special education technicians shall be under the direction of the supervising special education teacher who is responsible for instruction and assessment of students with special needs. Any more discussion on that before we move to consensus and move down to 2? Any dissent? I'm not seeing any, so we've reached consensus on that portion, and let's, by we, I mean the committee, which I'm not on, you all are. Number 2, special education technicians under the direction of under the direct supervision of a licensed special education teacher may A, schedule and coordinate special education meetings, B, collect, prepare, and organize student-specific data and information, C, delivers instruction in a one-to-one and small group sessions, and D, conduct mandatory statewide assessments. Any discussion on this proposed language?
I do think on Paul's piece there, we should maybe add special education technicians under the direct supervision of a licensed special education teacher as defined in 1055-603 and whatever the definition is, to just reference it back there.
Okay, let's let Julie get this jug of, or not Julie,
Julie,
sorry,
that's all.
Christy.
That's all defined by those rules later on in the definition when we get down there for that.
Yeah, but many times in ARM, we reference back to say when we list it as defined in that rule. We just reference it over there. You understand what I'm saying? Special education teachers
Yeah, I
under
do.
the
I don't-
direct supervision of a licensed special education teacher as defined in ARM 1055-603, whatever the number is.
I just put it in the chat.
602, sorry, yeah.
60251.
It's just technical, Patrick, how we write the ARM, I guess, if you will.
Paul, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, sorry, you guys would probably be happy I'd be on the phone still working through Patrick, but that's all right. But still kind of have two comments here. One kind of still that, does it have to be an active special ed teacher? Can it be my school psych that has an education special ed license, but actually not an active special ed teacher? That's one question. And then I don't know who was talking about it earlier because it was when I was on my phone. I would like to have a discussion about conduct mandatory statewide assessments. Not that I really have anything against that, but like we do NWA here, why couldn't a special ed technician maybe do our NWA assessments as well? If I read this, I might think that they might not be able to do that.
Thoughts on that?
They can. We can't. Those are district level decisions in terms of how you engage your staff with those district levels. Because we don't OPI doesn't oversee the district level assessments. We oversee that state level assessment. So that would be a local district decision on how you handle that piece. Julie, am I missing anything there?
I think you can add it. I don't see any problem with it. It's just saying that that they can conduct mandatory statewide assessments, and then you just say that, and any district assessments, you could put something in there. I'm trying to think of the right terms, Paul, like conduct mandatory state assessments and conduct
statewide and district level assessments.
Yeah.
I think that would just
go
prevent
ahead,
some
Paul.
confusion, in the future.
Yep.
And maybe then you need to take out the word mandatory because district level assessments are not mandatory.
And Paul, to your question about the teacher, when we get to definitions, it'll make sense because it just says that they have to have the endorsement.
Okay.
Kathy?
I would say you put your statewide, your district assessments, and then leave your mandatory, because you want to make sure that that mandatory statewide is still there because they are mandatory. I'd put it as your district level and mandatory statewide, because I think you want your mandatory in there for your statewide.
So just to clarify, is your proposal that we have D, conduct mandatory statewide assessments, and E, conduct district level assessments?
Well, I still think you want mandatory in there on D.
Yeah.
To conduct district-wide and then put mandatory statewide assessments. Because I think the mandatory was put in there for a reason, because they are.
So I have two thoughts on that. I have a couple thoughts. One is on the mandatory assessments. I like leaving the word mandatory in there. I think that's a really good point. But also we need to think about training. We don't want them conducting mandatory statewide assessments if they've not been trained how to do it. So I don't know where that fits. Because we don't want to just put a technician in that's not been trained how to conduct those mandatory statewide assessments. I think that's critical. And then
I don't think any of
even
our
a teacher
teachers have been
can't
trained in
conduct
any
it.
of that. Yeah.
A teacher can't conduct mandatory statewide assessments without being trained either. So it's kind of a requirement
They
to
all
be
have to
able
participate in
to
it. Yeah.
to access the platform and get in there and do that.
Right. I just want to make sure that we don't miss that piece. So, and I understand what you're saying, Julie, and I know that, but I just want to make sure we don't miss that piece. And then the other part on delivering instruction, I think that's great, but where's the gap between a para and a technician in delivering because we know paras can deliver instruction, but they cannot develop or design instruction. So where's that gap between a para and a technician on delivering and developing instruction? Am I making sense?
Mm-hmm. I can jump in on that one, Kathy.
That'd be great.
A lot of that, when you go back to the para language in 715, it talks about under direct supervision. So there's a
Right.
big difference there between what this says versus that direct supervision, like you're mentioning under that direct supervision model, right? Everything, right, it's designed to be set up on kind of that daily format where the
Yeah.
teacher has the design, the para comes in, checks in for the day, here's what we're doing, here's what
Yep.
is going. This is geared at thinking of it more as like a unit type setup to where, all right, we've assessed the student, the teacher's designed where they're headed. It's a phonemic awareness, right? This is the program or curriculum that we use based on the initial assessment. We're starting here, and that para or that special ed technician can then run through that set of lessons with that student to be able to then bring back that information to do the progress, looking at more of that longer chunk piece, I
Okay.
guess. So
there's still
trying to
no
take off that-
design, right? There's
No
no
design, no.
in-
The teacher's
Okay.
still designing, choosing, selecting all the curriculum, all of those things. It would just be being able to plan those and not being under that, again, that direct supervision.
Gotcha.
All those things should be happening within sight of the teacher in the classroom. This, again, allows for that flexibility for this person to have their own space that they can be
Perfect.
working in with those small groups, do all of those things. Absolutely.
So that's fantastic. Thanks, Patrick. And I agree with all of that. Is there language or verbiage that specifically talks about that? Because I can see what would happen would be, oh, I've got a special ed technician. Here you go, do phonemic awareness, and then there's no, see what I'm saying?
Kathy, do you think we maybe need to look at 3 and add something down below where what they cannot do to clarify that a little bit further, maybe?
Yeah, that probably would be a good idea. We just really want to make sure that in the arms that they can't design instruction, but that they can deliver it without, and I see the difference, Patrick, without that direct supervision, but they still can't design it.
Absolutely. And I think,
Okay. Yeah, because they haven't
think we
taken
can
any
add
methods
some
courses.
language. Yeah, I think we can add some language to 3 down there, part C, where it talks about make independent decisions regarding the implementation of a student's IEP or instructional program or design, or however we want to phrase that when we get down there. Yep.
So Chrissy, can you just add a note there? And we'll get to it when we get down there, but just to make sure we're thinking about that.
Julie, for reference, do you want me to drop the North Dakota piece in the chat there? No? Okay.
I don't know if it's necessary.
Okay, anything else on subpart 2? It looks like Rickulin, did you have?
It was just some trainings, maybe pertaining to the what they could take, or even like the like a refresher training in like let's see, like what did I put in there? Crisis prevention, I think, or intervention, or something like equivalent to it. I mean, just to kind of keep them up to date, because I don't know.
I think that might be district level.
The current ARM 1057-439 does require completion of approved special education technician online modules as determined by OPI or the superintendent of public instruction. I don't know if that.
Yeah,
there is
those
a training
40
piece that's in in ARM. Go ahead, Patrick.
Sorry, which training piece were you referencing there, Aislinn?
I was just looking at the slide.
So Patrick, Ricky Lynn put that list in the chat there. And so so
Yes,
there are
these are
some
all
training covered, yes.
I didn't see those in the chat. Sorry. Yes,
Yep.
the
Nope,
40
you're good.
modules. I'll drop the list here in the chat so you can see what they all are. But they're not set in stone either. The way that ARM was written as needs change, the superintendent has the ability to adjust which modules of those 40 or which modules are included in those 40. But I'll drop that link in so you can see what all those modules are.
It was just a thought that just kind of came across my mind, and I didn't
And they
know.
are,
So.
I think just about everything in here that you mentioned is outside of the CPI stuff. I think everything else is covered in those modules, but I'll drop that list here in the chat.
Okay, any other thoughts on this subpart? Okay. So currently, I'm just going to read it one more time for everybody. So it's 2 special education technicians under the direct supervision of a licensed special education teacher as defined in 1055-602-51. May A, schedule and coordinate special education meetings. B, collect, prepare, and organize student-specific data and information. C, deliver instruction in one-to-one and small group settings. And D, conduct district-level assessments and mandatory statewide assessments. Do I have any dissent from that just subpart of 1055-725? Looks like the committee has reached consensus. And now we'll go down to 3. This is where I know, Kathy, you had some thoughts on what we want to do here. I'll just read it really quickly one more time. 3, special education technicians shall not A, conduct or interpret formalized and standardized special education evaluations unless otherwise qualified to do so. B, access the student information system, SIS, for purposes of creating or developing documents related to the special education record with the exception of the access/contact log. C, make independent decisions regarding the implementation of a student's IEP. Or D, convene and conduct special education meetings. So since I know we already had a proposal to add something to that, I'll let you guys maybe work on that language. Go ahead, Kathy. Let's let Christy get it in there before we start giving her specific stuff.
Yeah, give me the go ahead when you're ready.
Okay. Christy, are you good? Looks like she has it now.
I'm ready. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to look at 3A first. And in conducting or interpreting formalized and standardized special education evaluations unless otherwise qualified to do so, it confuses me a little bit because if they're a special ed technician, they would have to take courses to qualify them in order to conduct or interpret those formalized, standardized special ed evaluations. I don't think a technician should do that. I think that is specifically for a special education teacher.
I'm going to agree with Kathy. I'm a
So
superintendent,
Dixie
but
and Kathy.
I have a special ed degree, and that's always been a big thing. Like, you take classes on that. I would not want a technician to do that.
I wouldn't
So
either.
Under A, just
It's
take
not
off
allowing
then,
them
you
to.
guys? Are you proposing conduct or interpret formalized and standard special education evaluations? That's it. And take out unless otherwise trained to do so.
No, I don't want them doing that, period.
Oh, it says
Because-
shall not at the top.
This is what
Sorry,
they cannot.
shall not. Okay.
Just to clarify,
you.
we're talking about things they can't do here.
Right,
So
and
did you
I
want to
agree.
remove the unless otherwise qualified to do so, or
I think
Okay.
so. I mean,
Yes.
I'm open to to conversation on that, but I don't think that language needs to be in there. They can't do it, period. Because they're not hired as a special ed teacher with that degree.
Yeah,
And that
Is there
that's
any situation in under which people can obtain independent certification? I don't know. That's why I'm asking the question. Is there any way in which people could not, and I don't mean all the things a special education teacher does, more along the lines of even into some of the other related services and things. Are there people that sorry, I lost my train of thought there, but I thought I had a good start. Is there that possibility that exists out there, I guess, that people could have some sort of certification in doing certain evaluations?
Well, but a related service provider has also gone on to grad school to be qualified to
I
do
understand
that.
all that. That's what I'm saying. Is there any situation, because I know, right, we're dealing with situations now with remote school psychologists that are conducting in-person evaluations with people that they have trained and certified to help them be that in-person coordinator for those things. So where does that go? I'm not saying we have certified all of those things. I'm just saying those things exist, and does that filter into this at all? Yes. Does that even exist in this world?
The call.
Well, does someone want to answer that first?
I'm not aware of it.
This is why the hands are, I don't know when they go up.
I'm like, I feel like that deserves an answer. But I mean, I also had questions about 3A and just asking if I thought it was confusing, and I was just wondering if there was a situation where there was a qualification for that to happen under sped tech, given the shall not language. Under 3B, I was wondering if we needed the SIS language if we're not going to use the abbreviation again. And then 3D, I'm wondering if we need to actually spell out IEP. Like, do we use it anywhere else? Have we actually, I mean, I know everyone on here knows what an IEP is, but like these are rules, not just for people like you, but for the general public. So I'm wondering if we should actually say what an IEP is. But those were the things that I actually had.
I was just looking to see if it was in the definitions, but
it's not.
Okay.
And I don't see IEP anywhere in this sub-chapter right there spelled out. So I think you could spell it out. I would still, I mean, with the SIS, I think you could take out the parentheses. But I do think for an IEP, you might want to leave that in parentheses because it's such a common term that people might not know what you mean by an individual education program. They might not know that's an IEP. I know that sounds crazy, but it's such a common term. But anyhow, I would recommend for that keeping that in.
And I would be fine with that, Julie. And just for clarification, is it program or plan? I always thought it was
Sorry, I was muted. Program is correct.
Oh.
But
Okay.
people use program and plan interchangeably, though I probably say it wrong half the time.
We have Kathy next.
So I'll say we typically, I agree with Patrick, we use program and plan interchangeably, but it all means the same thing. But I'm looking at B. If they have access to the SIS for creating and what they can't do, I agree with what we say there, except that I'm wondering where it says with the exception of the access and contact log, I think that a special ed technician would need access to the, and it's Infinite Campus. We all know what the program is. They need access to Infinite Campus in order to create the meeting notices. And that would be it. So that, because that I see that as part of their responsibilities is to create those meeting notices to send out to the parents. And the only way to have access to that is through Infinite Campus. But within Infinite Campus, they can they can have just access to just that piece. I mean, I know that as it should be that way. In fact, when way back in the, feels like dinosaur ages now, when I helped the Office of Public Instruction work with Infinite Campus, we created it that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so did you have, sorry, just in there, did you have a proposed language?
I don't know. I
change
don't know. I don't know how to exactly word it, but the proposed language would be that the exception, I agree with access to the contact log, but also to the meeting invites.
Okay. Any thoughts on that?
I'm wondering if we should just take out access the student information system for the purpose of, like, really what we're trying to say is they shall not create or develop documents related to special education records without the exception of a log. That is whether that's digital or not.
Well, and I don't even know if they need to be creating a log. I think really the only thing they need to be able to do is to create those meeting invites, period.
The contact log is where all of those things are recorded, that are like all of the reach out for all of the meeting invites, and parents aren't responding, and we're recording and documenting in that log. And so if they're the ones that are doing all of that, they
Right,
certainly
okay.
need access to that piece, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
And I would agree with the meeting notices part too. As we went through this, right, we were talking with several directors around the state, looking through this at what we couldn't do. And then, of course, going back to Mandy, our attorney, looking at federal regulations and everything, trying to put some of this together. But I think that's one we missed, was the meeting notice piece that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's crucial.
I want to be mindful of everyone's time, that it's 4:59. So we do have a couple more raised hands I want to get to. And we can all sit on this and come back at the next meeting. And if people have proposed language they want to, we have a couple weeks between now and then, think about, that's great too. So Crystal, I'll go to you. I know you've had your hand up for a while.
I know I kicked myself out somehow, so I came back in. It's because I want to go back to what our discussion about A. My thought process is I wouldn't want it to be limited. I mean, I don't think this is going to happen very often. It's just not likely to happen, but I wouldn't want to limit it, is the fact that we could hire in a large district, you're actually hiring a special education technician who is completely a special ed teacher, but you maybe don't have that opening. So I think that I like the language that says, unless you're qualified to do so. So I would actually like to have that put back in there, just so that there's no limiting language on, I mean, I don't think this is going to happen. It's not like there's a bunch of special ed teachers out there, but that's my thought process, is that I just don't want to limit it. If you have to hire them as a technician and they are actually a special ed teacher, why would we not let them do the things that they're qualified to do?
So I have a
Crystal,
question
I might
about
just
this.
argue with you on that a little bit.
Yeah, me too.
Just really quickly, because that's not what they've been hired to do, and that's not their
Exactly.
role. And for a
Yep.
district, I wouldn't want them liable
Mhm.
for somebody whose job is not the special education teacher and that been contracted and hired to do so, to be conducting that, even if they are licensed to do so.
I agree with Julie on that one 100%.
Okay, maybe something to sit and think on, because it is 5:01. McCall, did you want to
I'm
weigh in
happy
real
to wait
quick?
until the next meeting.
Okay. So we can revisit. I guess we'll start off the next one and see if everyone's okay with removing, unless I'm otherwise qualified to do so. Just, yeah, think about this language. Christy, do they have access to this? Are you going to send around? Can we send around a copy of what we've gotten to today before the next meeting, so everyone can review it?
Yeah. Yes,
Okay.
everyone should have, and I see a bunch of people in this document. You should have view access to this, so they should be able to see this. And I will just leave this as is with these proposed strikeouts here in the language here in this box for C, so you can see where you all have been having this discussion, and we can pick up right here next time.
Great, thank you. And then can you pull up I think there was like one more slide we had just to close out this. So I think, yeah, thank you, everyone. I think this has been a really productive discussion. We've gotten a lot done. Seems like we should be able to wrap up. So again, I don't think we have any public comment, but is there anybody online or that submitted public comment? I'm seeing a no from Christy. And then maybe we could just send around those sample economic impact survey questions. So you guys will be putting those together next week too. Christy, if you could just throw that in the folder or send an email out with those so everyone can take a look and just kind of see what we've done in the past and what sort of questions might be going out to, those go out to all the school clerks, right? During rule adoption?
They go out broadly to anyone can respond to that survey if it goes out broadly for anyone, and they can select their role. So we ask for a lot of participation, school clerks, superintendents, educators as well.
Okay, and you'll get that, so you'll be able to look and see what that looks like. And then our next meeting is on June 2nd, 2026, 3:30 to 5. Did I have any last minute questions or anything before we let you all go? Okay, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this process so far. I feel like you guys have had a really good discussion. And yeah, look forward to continuing it. Bye, everyone.